Hello and welcome back to the channel for another Doctor Who video. Now today we are going to be tackling some pretty big ideas. So namely what the current era of Doctor Who, be it the Chris Chibnall era or the Jodie Whittaker era or the 13th Doctor's era, whatever you want to call it, what the current era is all about. What the big ideas that connect this current era are. And I'm not so much talking in terms of plot and story and stuff and story arcs. I'm talking more about, on a fundamental level, the themes and ideas and things that connect the past 3 seasons of Doctor Who. So by way of example, if I asked you what the Moffat era was all about, you might say, oh, it's all about Moffat's approach to timey-wimey stories and playing around with time and all that sort of stuff. If I asked you what the first RTD era was about, you might say, it was to do with his very grounded approach to character and colourful characters and sort of redefining the role of the companion, for instance, compared to how it was in the classic series. Or you might go into the politics of those eras as well, for instance, stuff like RTD's approach to stories set in the future and how humans sort of always endure and survive and there's always hope at the end of the universe, that sort of thing. And similarly for Moffat, the whole sort of idea of the Doctor being like a title or a sort of idea that the Doctor and the character of the Doctor sort of aspires to be like. That disconnect between the Doctor as a person and the Doctor as an idea or an ideal that the Doctor aspires to be. So that's the sort of thing we're working towards here, some sort of big theory that connects the past 3 seasons of Doctor Who. And as the basis of my argument, I'm going to use the fact that Chris Chibnall revealed in an interview he did in the current issue of Doctor Who magazine that he was adopted. Which, I think it is a pretty big game changer, really. That is a piece of information we didn't have before, when Flux was on, when Series 11 was on, when Series 12 was on. And knowing that now sort of enables us, I think, to put a lot of stuff from those 3 seasons and a lot of stuff from this era into perspective and allows us to sort of recontextualize certain things and certain stories and certain ideas. And we can see this most obviously, with the whole thing of the Timeless Child. So the Timeless Child idea or arc, whatever you want to call it, recontextualizes the Doctor as a character into someone who was adopted, essentially. It sort of, retroactively plugs that into the Doctor's backstory. And it wouldn't be right for us to speculate about the specific details of Chris Chibnall's own situation there in terms of, how he was adopted and all that sort of stuff. But essentially, that is a link we can draw. And similarly as well with the whole way that it affects the Doctor, this whole identity crisis she undergoes in Series 12 and then in Flux as well. I think that is quite clearly, maybe not sort of inspired by the specific details of Chris Chibnall's own situation, but it is inspired by those ideas surrounding adoption and that whole fact, I suppose, of not quite knowing the exact details of your own past and of your own origins. That is something which I think we can quite clearly say Chris Chibnall has brought to the table here and which has influenced his whole approach to that arc. And you can see that very clearly in the Flux story breakdown they released on the official YouTube channel a few months back, where it's basically an interview with Chris Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker as well a little bit, but predominantly Chibnall, where he breaks down the ideas and the thinking behind the whole Flux storyline. And there are parts of that video, parts of that interview, where, knowing what we know now, we can very clearly see, I think, that the whole fact of Chris Chibnall being adopted himself very much inspired his approach to Flux and the Timeless Child as a bigger sort of idea. But I think it does permeate into other aspects of the era as well, because, don't forget the Timeless Child, a lot of people make a big thing about it, but actually it didn't come into effect until halfway through his era. So there's a whole half, the first half of the Chris Chibnall era, which wasn't at all concerned with the Timeless Child. But nevertheless, I think we can find a lot of the same ideas and a lot of the same thinking in those earlier stories. For instance, Series 11 was massively concerned with ideas of family. That was the big theme for that series. So most notably, the whole relationship between the Doctor and her companions was sort of reimagined as that of a sort of very unlikely, unorthodox family, where it's these people that wouldn't have otherwise come together, but they do come together and they do form these strong friendships and these strong bonds. And there are other examples of that across the series where essentially it's endorsing this notion of family which isn't sort of restricted to traditional notions of family, like where it's to do with DNA and blood and all that sort of stuff, but where family is more about what people mean to each other and what people do for each other. For instance, if we look at Resolution, say, the whole thing with Ryan's dad, and I think Graham says to him, our family's not about DNA, it's about what you do and you haven't done enough. Similar sort of ideas like that where, sometimes, we do get these genuine familial bonds where it is to do with DNA, like brothers and sisters. Like in the Stanger Conundrum, we get Eve Cicero and her brother Durkas. But there are lots of other examples, like in Demons of the Punjab, for instance, where we get the whole idea of a union between a Hindu and a Muslim, and these very unorthodox ideas, of people that belong with each other or that go with each other or whatever, and these sort of relationships and friendships which defy the odds. I think the whole thing with Ryan's dad is an example of, when you sort of traditional DNA, blood, family members aren't always there for you, sometimes let you down, whatever it is. It's that sort of idea. And the whole sort of confrontation, between Ryan and his dad in that episode, I think, we can draw parallels there with what we later saw in Flux with the Doctor and Tech Taeun. I mean, okay, Ryan wasn't adopted, but there are sort of similar ideas at play there in the sense that Ryan's got this parent who's been estranged for all these years and suddenly then shows up again, and there are some sort of scores to settle there and some things to work through. And in that scene in the cafe where Ryan's sort of talking about the impact of not having a father for all those years, I think we can trace that back as well to these ideas of adoption and of identity, and essentially how it screws people up when they don't have that sort of structure of family in place in their younger years. I think we can see that quite clearly with both Ryan and the Doctor. I mean, we do sort of get it a bit with Yaz as well in Demons of the Punjab, where she goes back in time to meet her grandma, and it's not quite what she expects. There are secrets and things she didn't know about her grandma, this first husband, what was going on there, and she sort of says to Graham in that scene between her and Graham, she lied to me. And Graham says something along the lines of, none of us know the truth of our own lives. That, again, is a very clear example, I think, of these ideas permeating through into this era. This idea of not having a clear grasp on your origins, on your heritage, on your sense of identity and family. But yeah, those are the three sort of big examples. Yaz in Demons of the Punjab, Ryan with his dad, and the Doctor in The Timeless Child. And then beyond that as well, I think there are sort of other examples of these ideas of family or identity sort of permeating across into other episodes. So just off the top of my head, the whole sort of idea and the concept of DNA being tampered with and altered in Spyfall, or the whole idea of a planet which messes with your memories in the Battle of Ranskorav Kolos, and the effects of this amnesia on Paltraki, where he doesn't have a secure sense of who he is and he doesn't have a secure sense of self. We also get the whole unorthodox family thing in the Stanger Conundrum with Yoss, and obviously the whole idea of a pregnant man, and the whole thing of him sort of deciding whether or not to give his child away or to keep it. That, I think, now we can very clearly see is all influenced by ideas of adoption. And the decision he makes to actually keep his child rather than give it away is all the more significant now, I think, knowing what we know. So that's the bulk of it, really. Those are the main examples that I could think of and that I could find. There may be other ones as well. If you yourself have noticed anything that I haven't mentioned or forgot to mention or whatever, please let me know in the comments section below. And let me know your thoughts on this in the comments. Do you agree with me that the whole fact of Chibnall being adopted is the whole big idea, the whole big thing that sort of informed his era and his approach to Doctor Who? Do you disagree? Whatever, just let me know either way. But do keep it civil. This isn't about whether you think the episodes are any good or the era or whatever. It's not about quality as such. It's more about the thinking that went into the era, regardless of what you think of the execution of these ideas and the end result. Please leave a like if you've enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And if you want to go one step further, the link to my Patreon page is in the video description. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye for now.